joining us in studio this morning, Mr. Matt Bristol from Bristol Law Office. How are you doing this morning?
Good, Sean. How are you doing?
Doing good. Doing real good. How's your summer been so far?
So far, so good. Went to the pet costume contest at the UFO Festival.
Okay.
Always enjoy that a lot.
Yeah. Did you bring a pet to the contest, or were you just there as a spectator?
I'm there as a spectator
Okay.
and take pictures, and so that's just kind of a fun part of the whole festival. And
Very cool.
did you guys have a location there for the festival?
We weren't in the festival proper. We were mostly set up at the actual UFO Museum and Research Center. That's kind of our home for the 2 days for the festival, for Thursday and Friday. We also hosted Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis. I was actually out there at the UFO Museum, so that was kind of our base of operations for the festival proper. And then it was funny too because it was UFO Festival and then 4th of July, and then just for the whole last week, Roswell has been in this kind of weird like zombie fog. Like everybody I've talked to is just kind of like, oh man, I'm just tired. Everybody's just sick of celebration. We don't want to go and do anything. But summer rolls on. Yes,
It does, and especially the summer heat rolls on.
goodness gracious, it has been sweltering. I kept, I was on that hope that like we were gonna have a summer like last summer where it was really really hot at the beginning and then relatively reasonable for the rest of summer.
It was, yeah, it was.
But I don't know, maybe we just hit another heat wave and things will kind of calm down as we head towards the back half of the summertime season.
Well, I hope you get that AC fixed on your car.
Yeah, boy howdy, it's
Brutal.
it's been fun.
Yeah.
It's it's a real, what it is I've been to the bottom now, so it's like as soon as I get even like a little bit of AC, I'm gonna appreciate. It's what's the Pursuit of Happiness, basically. Yeah, I'm Will Smith, The Pursuit of Happiness. Yeah, I'm
There you
gonna
go.
really appreciate when I get just a little bit.
Start carrying one of those 8-pound bags of ice in the car. Maybe that'll help.
I legitimately thought about getting a styrofoam cooler and then a thing of ice just to kind of throw some at my face every now and again while I was driving.
Good idea.
But that's okay. Summertime rolls on, and we live in this weird post-pandemic world. Things changed. I was actually just thinking about this yesterday as I got in my car. The pandemic, COVID took a lot of stuff from a lot of people. It took family members. It took, in a lot of cases, people's hair. I've talked to people that have lost their hairlines, and in a lot of cases, it took marriages. I mean, it dissolved mine. It was one of those situations where the normal stresses of life, in addition to all of the COVID protocols and all the stuff we had to deal with, a lot of people made that decision to kind of just go their separate ways. And I think the pandemic was a big part of that.
There's a lot of stress during the pandemic. The isolation was part of it. The masks, the not being able to go out and do things. Yeah. I've talked to several mental health providers in the community, and they said their business just skyrocketed during the pandemic.
I started seeking therapy ever since the pandemic, and a lot of
That's good.
A lot of that because of the situations that the pandemic created, like the dissolution of a marriage, for example. But as that happens, there's a lot of different things that have to be looked at. Sure, there's it's the emotional side of things, but then there's the business side of things. There's the property side of things. There's who owns what, and you got to go through that whole process. So let's talk for a minute about community property. I think that's something that needs to be touched on, and you have a bit of knowledge in that field.
Yes, thank you. New Mexico is one of the 8 community property states in the country, and that touches all aspects of our lives,
Right.
and not just divorce, but it affects probate. It even affects bankruptcy, interestingly enough.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's say there's a couple, imaginary couple, we'll call them Mike and Kim.
All right. We're just going to start off on that one. Mike, hope you're not listening, bud.
So let's say for some reason they're looking into a bankruptcy situation.
Sure.
So if they do, they have to list all community assets and all community debt.
So what qualifies as community assets and community debt?
Good question. What the law looks at is the date of marriage.
Okay.
So I've had couples, well, we've been together 15 years, but only married 5. And so I tell them, well, the date of marriage is what matters. So from the date of marriage forward, any asset is a community asset, any debt's a community debt.
So if you say buy a house while you're engaged, but you haven't gotten married yet, that wouldn't necessarily count as community property.
So let's split that hair.
Okay.
If it's in Mike's name while he's dating Kim,
Right.
but Mike buys it pre-marriage, it's Mike's whole and separate.
Gotcha.
Now, if Mike and Kim buy it before they're married, then they're just business partners.
They co-own the house.
Right.
At that point, it's a business property.
It's a business property or like a brother and
an
sister or something like that.
Okay.
Okay. So, so let me write, I got that written down somewhere. Okay. We'll come back. That brings up an idea we'll come back to.
Okay.
So any asset acquired after the date of marriage is both husband and wife, 50-50, any debt's 50-50.
Okay.
And I've had a lot of people say, well, but all those credit cards are my husband's name. They're not my debt. And the answer is, no, that's not right. They're your debt.
Right.
Even though the credit card was your husband's name, you never looked at it, never saw it, it's community debt.
So those are shared debts.
Those are.
Now I'm curious. If that covers basically all debts that can be accrued, up to and including student loan debt.
If it was occurred after marriage.
Sure.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Cool. Anyways, sorry, I'm just
That's all right.
asking for personal reasons. But anyways, okay, so community property, that covers everything after the date of marriage.
After the date of marriage.
Okay.
So if Mike and Kim, let's say they're looking at a bankruptcy situation because of debt. But what if Kim had an inheritance? So Kim inherited this money from her folks. So inheritance is considered sole and separate property.
Gotcha.
So anything acquired during the marriage is a community asset unless it was acquired by inheritance or gift.
Okay.
So Kim's got this big inheritance, and Kim says, well, I don't want to file bankruptcy if they're going to take my inheritance away from me. So now we have a dilemma. What do we do?
Right.
So we sit down and we talk. So, okay, well, list all the community assets.
Okay.
So we go down, we list all the community assets. Well, when somebody files a bankruptcy, there's a list of assets they get to keep. So the purpose of bankruptcy is to start fresh, not start from scratch.
Right. You don't get a barrel with straps over it. You have to have a car to be able to get to work. You have to be able to have a place to live to set, have a base of operations.
And each person who files bankruptcy gets a list of assets.
Sure.
So, so we look at the list of assets. Then we got two lists we can pick from. So, for example, in one list, Mike could protect up to $60,000 worth of equity to home. He can protect all the household goods and furnishings. He can protect the retirement, up to $5,000 worth of motor vehicle. But if it's a new motor vehicle, it's upside down anyway.
Sure.
So we look at the community assets, and lo and behold, Mike's list of protected assets protects all the community assets. So that means Mike's the only person that has to file bankruptcy.
Okay. So then Kim in this scenario wouldn't have to file.
She doesn't file bankruptcy.
Okay.
Mike does file bankruptcy, but his list of assets protects all the community assets.
Now, as a couple, if one, I mean, and this is where I'm confused because I always assumed as a couple you do everything together. So if say for example Mike in this scenario files for bankruptcy, Kim hasn't necessarily filed. See, you just think of Mike and Kim having filed for bankruptcy.
Right.
In this case, it's just Mike
Just
having done
Mike.
so. Okay.
So you're right. Kim hasn't filed.
Right.
That means technically Kim is still liable on all these community debts.
Okay.
So can they sue Kim? Well, yes, they can because she didn't file bankruptcy.
Because she's not under those protections.
But they cannot collect against any community asset, including her paycheck. Her paycheck's a community asset.
Okay.
So if they can't collect against any community asset, why would they bother suing her?
For the inheritance.
They don't know about that.
Okay, fair enough. It's not on the list. Okay.
But very good. Her sole and separate property is liable for those debts.
Right.
Except no creditor ever realizes anybody has any sole and separate property. So they end up not bothering Kim, and her sole and separate property is protected because Mike does not disclose Kim's sole and separate property in the bankruptcy because Mike only lists his community property and his sole and separate asset.
Gotcha.
He doesn't list Kim's sole and separate property. He has no legal interest in it. So it's not disclosed anywhere, and it's perfectly legal.
Wow. Okay. That's fascinating.
So it's yes, kind of kind of a long story, but it's an interesting twist of you can get out of the credit card debt and still protect some sold separate assets.
Sure. But now this also introduces an interesting set of issues. What happens if, say, for example, down the road, while you're still dealing with this issue of bankruptcy and you're still dealing with all these creditor issues, what happens if the marriage were to not work out? Let's say things were to dissolve.
So, couple things there. So once there's a divorce, there's no community property.
Right.
So if a creditor goes after Kim, they can get anything she's got at that point because there's no community property.
Gotcha.
But her property, sole and separate property, is not subject to division in the divorce because it's not a community asset.
Okay.
So, so not only that, but Mike's filing of the bankruptcy protects present community assets and future community assets.
Okay.
So in 2-3 years, they get a different car, different house. That's still community property.
Okay.
And those are protected. And even if Kim gets sued, those assets are still protected.
So you're still under that shelter.
Yeah.
How long does that apply?
Just for freaking ever.
So it's in perpetuity, essentially.
Yeah.
Nice.
For community assets. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a really subtle thing. And there's only 8 states that have that protection.
Sure.
So it took us a long, long time to educate creditors that, well, you can sue the other spouse, the non-filing spouse, but you can't collect. And there's a New Mexico case on that that's, gosh, I don't know, 25 years old. So for our clients, if there's a creditor that goes after the non-filing spouse, we have this Dear Dumbass letter that says, oh, you can sue her all you want.
Right.
But here's the New Mexico case that says you can't collect against any community asset.
God bless legal precedent.
You bet.
It really has made a massive difference. So we're one of only, you said, 8 states that have those protections.
Yes.
Wow, and I'm guessing it was just an act of, I was going to say an act of God, but an act of Congress that got us there. So let's say, for example, your base of operations is one of those states that doesn't have those protections. You're basically just up a creek without a paddle.
Don't know about those states. So the bankruptcy code provides that state by state can choose the federal bankruptcy list of protected assets, or the state can choose the state law list of protected assets, or both.
Okay.
And so New Mexico has chosen both. You can choose either one. But in non-community property states, don't know. Some of the East Coast laws about marriage and property interests are different than some of the Midwest or the West Coast. So the East Coast was settled by the English, and under English common law, the husband owned everything.
Right.
And so the wife didn't own anything. And so they kind of thought that was unfair at some point. And so they have what are called rights of dower and courtesy, where the wife has some sort of interest in the property of the family.
Right.
But I'm not sure exactly what those laws are because I've never lived over there.
Right.
But that is why under English custom in a divorce, the husband always got the children because they were his property.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now, so I'm curious is as far as like your list of assets goes. Let's say we're filing for bankruptcy, or I'm filing for bankruptcy in my case. Are there any set list of assets, or is that kind of just up in the air as to what your assets could be?
There's a dollar list typically of what you get to keep.
Okay.
And so for under state law per person, you can protect up to $60,000 worth of equity in a homestead.
Okay.
Has to be a home.
Right.
All of your household goods and furnishings are protected. $4,000 worth of motor vehicle, net, fair market value minus debt. Your retirement under state law is 100% protected, period. And so this is state law. This is non-bankruptcy law.
Right.
So your retirement's always protected. Like $2,500 worth of jewelry at used jewelry store prices.
Sure.
And there's another list of miscellaneous stuff, but that usually covers most people's stuff.
Now let's just say, for example, and I know this opens up a whole new list of issues with the business, but let's say, for example, I have like a food truck. Let's say we're in the process of starting a business. We haven't started it yet, but we own, let's say, for example, a food truck in the process of getting something started.
So that's a good question. So again, the question is going to be, what's the net value? What's the fair market value of the food truck and contents minus any debt you owe on it?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's negative, well, it's not really an asset, is it?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So you're good. You can keep it.
Okay.
Because it's not really an asset at that point.
Gotcha.
But let's say you got this truck free and clear, you got the equipment free and clear, you got food in there, and you go, well, now what do you do?
Right.
So under New Mexico law, you can protect what are called tools of trade.
Mm-hmm.
So my tools of trade would be law books.
Right.
So in a restaurant, tools of trade would be restaurant equipment.
Okay.
But that's pretty darn small. So like $2,500 or so. It's a pretty small figure.
Okay.
So then I'd say, okay, Sean, well, let's look at the federal list of things you can keep.
Okay.
So under the federal list of things that you get to keep, instead of $60,000 worth of homestead protection, you only get $25,000 worth of homestead protection.
Right.
And Sean says, well, I live in an apartment. I don't need a homestead protection.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's the interesting part about the federal side. If you do not have a homestead, then up to $12,500, 50% of the homestead protection.
Sure.
Up to $12,500 becomes what's called the wild card. And you can use those dollars like monopoly money
Just kind of wherever.
Protect any other asset you
Okay.
have, like food truck, gold bars,
Right.
Bitcoin, whatever.
But only 12.5.
12.5.
Okay. Well, that's
But you get that miscellaneous on the federal side. You don't get it on the state side.
right.
So that's why we go through the whole list of everything you got, because we don't know which side we'll need to flex to.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how you'd protect the food truck.
You can't. It's not like a piecemeal, a la carte, pick and choose from one to the other. You got to go either the state route or the federal route.
State route or federal route.
Gotcha.
All the way one or all the way the other. Yeah.
That makes sense. But it's good to know that when you're in a state where you're basically at the bottom of the barrel. You're thinking, well, I have no other options. Bankruptcy is my only option. It's good to know that once you open that door, there's a whole room full of other doors.
Well, there is. So if you think about Sean lives in the apartment, he's got the job and the food truck on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you get to keep the food truck.
Sure.
You just got to keep all your household goods and furnishings in the apartment.
Right.
You just got to keep your car.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to keep your retirement. You're golden.
All you did was dissolve the debt.
Right.
Essentially.
So you're golden.
But
yeah.
completely legally.
Yeah.
And I didn't even have to off anybody or find a vat of hydrochloric acid or anything.
All right. Or run a backhoe. No.
Right. Exactly. I didn't have to put it all down on black. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Huh.
So it's a really cool deal if you think about it. And so bankruptcy is actually older than the United States. It was a law in England before the U.S. was a country. So even that long ago, they realized, that sometimes the stuff hits the fan.
Sure.
And you just need a reset. In fact, Winston Churchill was 27 when he filed bankruptcy, and he became Prime Minister of England. So it's not the end of the world.
So from the perspective of somebody like me that doesn't have a lot to lose to begin with, what's the negative of filing for a bankruptcy? Because from the way the picture you're painting is, I would be an idiot to not file for bankruptcy right now.
Depending on the amount of debt you have, right?
Right.
And so some people say, I've had people, young, 20-year-olds come in.
Sure.
Well, I only owe $8,000. I say, well, how much do you make? They say minimum wage. Suppose no way you can pay that back.
Right.
It's not that 8,000 is necessarily overwhelming, but there's no way in heck on minimum wage you'll ever pay that back.
Now, okay, so how long does a bankruptcy hang on your credit, on your image?
So
How long do you own that?
two things. It's on the credit report for 10 years.
Uh-huh.
But there's no law that prevents you from getting credit for 10 years. It's just on the credit report.
It just is listed.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's up to the creditor.
Right. But part of the bankruptcy paperwork is you're required to do a budget.
Mm-hmm.
And all budgets are basically 5-year budgets.
Okay.
So what do you mean by that, Matt?
Right.
Well, Sean, let's look at your car. You just had the AC go out.
Uh-huh.
In your bankruptcy budget, you're allowed a savings account for car repair, home maintenance or appliance repair.
Okay.
We put in a clothing budget. Not that you buy clothes every month.
Right.
But if you have little kids, it's almost every month. There's birthday, Christmas during the year. So let's say $100 a month in clothing allowance, $100 for maybe replacing household goods or furnishings, couch, TV, whatever, maybe $100 a month. And I like $200 a month for car repair because we all know we're going to get it real quick.
Oh, yeah.
And in a 5-year budget, for example, the battery's not going to last 5 years.
Right.
So you're saving $400 a month.
Okay.
Well, in 25 months, in 2 years, that $400 a month adds up to $10,000 in the bank.
Right.
Plus 2 tax refunds. And it's like, well, gee, if I was stuck with my credit cards, I'd never be able to save that kind of money.
Right.
And is a bankruptcy going to hurt my credit? Well, if you're thinking about bankruptcy, chances are your credit's on the way to being shot, if not already.
Right.
But if you do file in 2 years, you'd have over 10 grand in the bank. Do you really care what the credit report says?
Yeah, at that point, you're just basically making it rain wherever you go. You don't need a credit card.
Yeah.
That's at that point you figured out how to circumvent the system, so to speak.
Yeah. So what's the downside to having 10 grand in the bank?
So what's not covered under bankruptcy protections? What basically after you made your budget, anything that's not under that budget would then basically be susceptible to it's the creditors at that point, correct? Like everything else goes to them.
Good question. So the reason we do the budget is, do you need a bankruptcy or don't you? And then if you do, your budget determines which chapter 7 or 13.
Okay, gotcha.
So once we do your budget, if you have no leftover money, you're a chapter 7 bankruptcy. Lasts about 90 days, poof, it's over.
Okay.
They don't waste their time.
Sure.
But then if you say, well, I'm a chapter 7, then they say, well, okay, well, what's the state median income for a family of your size? So if it's a single person, what's the state median income for a single person? If it's a couple, what's the state median income for a couple or a family of 2, 3, 4?
Not like minimum income. It's the median.
Median income.
Gotcha.
So if you're at or below median income, there's no problem with being a chapter 7.
Okay.
If you're above the median income, then they think you should be a chapter 13.
Okay.
So a chapter 13 is somebody does their budget and they have leftover money at the end of the month.
Sure.
So for 5 years, the bankruptcy court collects that extra money.
Mm-hmm.
The bankruptcy court pays the unsecured creditors. And in 5 years, that's it. And your remaining balance is wiped out at the end of the 5 years. Now, of course, student loans, can't wipe those out.
Right.
Child support, can't wipe those out.
Even with death, right? Like if someone dies, student loan debt lives on.
Their estate is liable for the student loan, not their heirs. You do not inherit debt.
Okay. That's good to know.
Not for 150
so
years.
If I die worthless, that's all. So you just gotta aim high. Aim for just dying worthless. That's how you do it.
They can't go after your kids, no.
Good to know. Rhiannon, you're all set. By the way, happy birthday, Rhiannon. I need to get that out of the way real quick.
Oh, yes. Happy birthday.
Yeah, she's 9 years old today.
9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
She's not listening. She's not in our target demo. I know. She tunes out anytime we start talking about bankruptcies, which is a lot, actually. It's weird in my house. But getting back to topic. So student loan debt it doesn't ever go away.
Not unless you become disabled.
Okay. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
For some reason, become medically disabled.
And now intentionally disabled? Like if I were to I don't know, accidentally fall off of a bridge into a highway into oncoming traffic, but I survived, but I'm disabled. Again, hypothetically, all hypothetical.
They might.
And we're not on the record, Matt. We're not on the record. We are on the air, but we're not on the record.
Yeah. They'll probably give you a mental disability for jumping off.
Fair enough. I'll take what I can get. So, okay. So then chapter 7 versus chapter 13, it's basically 90 days versus
5 years.
Or 5 years. Yeah. So that's there's definitely a difference there.
Big difference. And because it's 5 years, that's why you always do a 5-year budget.
Gotcha.
Because when the car does break during that 5-year period, you'll need the cash to fix it. Because in the 13, you can't use a credit card or can't put anything on, can't buy it at Walmart or Kmart and charge it. You can't charge anything.
Okay.
You have to pay cash. Now they're about to come up with some new subchapter, I think it's called 5, which is kind of some kind of weird hybrid. And they haven't quite passed it yet. They're thinking about it, and it'll make things a little more simple, I think.
Okay.
But
so it's like a hybrid of 7 and 13?
Some kind of weird deal like that.
Why didn't we land with 10? I mean, I figured if we're gonna have a hybrid, you should meet in the middle. This is just all semantics.
Well, I don't know, and I don't know what's the subchapter of either.
Sure.
But it's like they pretend everybody's got the ability to pay back until you show you can't. Then okay, you don't have to. It's kind of a weird deal.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I've signed up for a continuing education class to learn more about it.
Very cool. Okay. So now I had a question. It just kind of went out of my head. Okay. So after one is filed for bankruptcy, let's say, you go through your process, you've done your budget. After your 5 years, for example, with 13, everything is essentially wiped out and you start clean. It's
right.
Clean slate.
Yep.
Like scorched earth, essentially.
Yeah.
That's
and then the chapter 7 lasts about 90 days, and then poof, that's it. They don't knock on your door in 3 or 4 months to see how you're doing, or to see if you've acquired some new asset. They really don't bother you unless you win the lottery.
Right. Ooh, okay.
If you win the lottery, they're going to come knock on your door.
But at that point, well, you can take care of things, right? I mean, if you win $34 million, you're good to go.
Well, not really.
Okay.
So when you file the bankruptcy, you list everything you own, or maybe claim an interest in. Okay, so dad's passed away, I have an interest in his estate, for example.
Sure.
Or, I don't own the car yet because I'm still paying on it. But you list every asset you own. So if you don't list an asset, guess what the penalty is? You don't own it. Yeah,
right.
They own it, not you.
Ha.
So
at that point, you just stop playing the Powerball.
Well, right. You didn't list winning Powerball ticket on your list of assets. So technically, it's not your winning Powerball ticket. It belongs to the bankruptcy court. Ooh. So if you cash the ticket in and you pay everybody back, then you just use the bankruptcy court's money to do that, and that's a federal offense.
Gotcha. So, yeah.
You call Matt.
I need a lawyer.
Yeah, I need a lawyer.
I'm sitting here with a barrel with straps on it. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do.
And so I call the bankruptcy court. We let them cash their ticket. They pay everybody, and then they give you the rest of the money back. They won't keep it.
Okay.
You could have the winning lottery ticket in your pocket right now, Sean, and still file bankruptcy.
Okay.
There's no requirement you be bankrupt to file bankruptcy.
Really? Okay. You just have to go through the process. Now, where does it limit you? Like, obviously you can't charge anything with like a credit card, but you could use, say, for example, a debit card. If you were shopping online for like an Amazon or something like that, you could just use your bank card, essentially.
Right.
That's just digital cash.
Right. That's cash.
Okay.
That's cash.
So there's really, I mean, outside of just not being able to use a credit card, having that mark on your credit, for example, if you're trying to buy a home, or if you're, say, for example, getting a new car, even in a lot of cases, those folks will see that and work with you, in a lot of cases.
Yeah, they will. Matter of fact, all of our clients, after the bankruptcy's filed, they get mail from used car dealers in Albuquerque trying to sell them a car.
Oh, I've done enough car commercials to say good that I know it's good credit, bad credit, no credit, no problem. That's how they operate.
Yeah. And then there's people that say, well, I want to buy a house in 5 or 6 years.
Sure.
Is this going to hurt me? And I tell them, well, you got to get rid of the debt anyway because you got too much debt to buy a house.
Right.
But then you go talk to the mortgage broker 3 or 4 years in advance, and you say, okay, in 4 years, I want to buy a house. What are you going to want to see from me? What kind of, debt ratio?
Right.
What kind of down payment? I've got a bankruptcy. Is there some way around that I can show you something else where you still give me a house loan? Do a larger down payment or whatever, smaller house, a smaller loan. So you go talk to that broker, mortgage broker, whatever, the local bank, credit union, see what they want to see, and then you work on that.
Okay.
There's ways to work around it.
It turns out there's always workarounds. Find yourself a super rich friend, have them buy a house, cash, and then you just buy it off of them.
There you go.
I'm literally using an example a friend of mine is doing right now. So you just got to find yourself a workaround.
Yeah.
When the going gets tough, the tough get creative.
That's right. You're only limited by your imagination.
There you go. We are running tight on time. Interesting conversation. But if folks
Thanks, Sean.
if folks want to reach out, want more information about you, the office, if they need your help, if we've sparked an interest in someone saying, okay, I'm ready to go. This is I was thinking about it. I was toying with the idea of a bankruptcy, and this is the thing that helped me pull the trigger. How do they find you?
BristolLawOffice.com or 625-5284. Give us a call, set up an appointment. The bankruptcy appointments, the only appointments we have that are actually free, and that's free whether you hire us or not.
Okay.
So the consultations usually last about an hour. But as you can see, it has to do with budget. How much do you make?
Sure.
What are your assets? So it requires a lot of paperwork just to come in and talk.
When you're staring at that wall of bankruptcy, it seems insurmountable. It seems terrifying, and everybody's screaming at you. You've messed up. You've made mistakes. This is that opportunity for you to sit down with somebody who knows what they're doing and can say, it's not the end of the road. It's not the end all be all. In fact, this gives you more options on the table.
It does. And 90% of our clients keep everything they own.
Sure.
The only thing they lose is the unsecured debt.
The scariest thing about bankruptcy is the word bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Just that simple.
That's it.
625-5284, BristolLawOffice.com. I memorized that number strictly because of the way he says it. I've done Matt's commercials for years, and every single time he says it with the exact same tone and tenor. 625-5284, BristolLawOffice.com. Simple. When you're borderline autistic, you tend to remember things in unique ways. So there you go. Well, Matt, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Sean. Enjoyed it.
Absolutely appreciate having you here.
Have a good week.